Trust me to Kalmar's skull. It's time for the Mad Merlins Warhammer 40,000 Imperium Journey. Finale Special Roboute Guilliman, Issues 79 and 80, Part 1, Lore, Build, Paint, and a Gallery. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Mad Merlins Warhammer 40,000 Imperium Journey. So today we are reaching the end of the initial magazine run, which is the initial 80 issues. And here we have the finale with the Lord of Macragge, Lord Regent of the Imperium himself, the returned Primarch, the Avenging Son, Mr. Roboute Guilliman. Now, you may notice I am absent the frames. That's because I kind of already filmed this video once before, but it didn't record the sound. So what I will try to do is cut in a overview of the frames without the sound, sadly. But as an extra bonus, there will be a gallery of the completed Roboute Guilliman at the end of this video. So before we get into anything, don't forget to, of course, like this video if you are enjoying the content. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And don't forget to tickle that little bell icon, as it helps you keep up to date with all my mad content. And of course, drop a comment down below. I love hearing back from all you guys, and it helps push this channel out onto the YouTube algorithm. So then, here we go with issues 79 and 80. So we've got quite a bit of information in here, but luckily issue 80 is 70% paint guide. So let's have a look then through the magazines, and then we'll give you that cool gallery of my finished model. And I'll even go over some of the tips I've had for building and painting him. So hopefully you've managed to weather through listening to nothing for the overview of the frames. But hopefully you get the gist of how the model looks on the frames and how he will go together. But to help that, we will now look at issue 79, which does include the build guide for Roboute Guilliman. We learn a little bit of his background, and we have a finale to the Rogue Trader's log. So full issue contents is battle record for Roboute Guilliman. We learn about Roboute Guilliman himself, Obelisk and Lyrak Part 2, the Price of Vengeance, which is the finale for our Rogue Trader. We have a build guide, and we have Assaulting the Gate, our second to last mission in the veteran pack. So moving on then, we've got our battle record for Roboute Guilliman himself. So the Avenging Son, the Primarch of the Ultramarines, Roboute Guilliman spent 10,000 years in stasis, having been mortally wounded by his traitorous brother Fulgrim. Restored to life once more, the Primarch has taken command of the Imperium's armies to strike back against chaos. We see Roboute Guilliman with his resplendent war gear, so the Armour of Fate, slightly updated version to his armour he wore during the Heresy. It now incorporates important life-sustaining technologies that prevents the wound inflicted by Guilliman from fully taking effect. Although it doesn't stop him from dying, as he has died to the hands of Mortarion, but thanks to the intervention of the Emperor, it has revived him back to living again. Speaking of the Emperor, he wields the Emperor's sword, and yes, this is the very same sword the Emperor has wielded when he strode the stars as a living, breathing being. It was gifted to Guilliman when Guilliman approached the Golden Throne and spoke with his father, and it has the ability to inflict true death upon demons, so watch out, demon Primarchs. He does have the Hand of Dominion as well, created by Belisarius Cawl. It's a relic power fist that also incorporates a heavy bolter. He also has various other bits of war gear, but these are the ones he carries with him the most. We also see here he has the helmet as well, if you so chose to build your model that way. On the back of the battle record, we can't name him and we can't give him any titles because he already has those. So his name is Roboute Guilliman. He is the Primarch of the Ultramarines, the Avenging Son, and Lord Commander of the Imperium. We can, though, put some little bits of record down, so we keep records of the Armour of Fate and how it's done in battles, and the same for the enemies slain by the Emperor's Sword. It's a pity we ain't got one for the Hand of Dominion, but still, it's pretty cool. We need a little bit of battle record, so we can write down what he's done in the missions that he gets to play in, but we also have a few bits of information about what happened before his time being revived. So he defeated the Alpha Legion on Escrador, slaying the traitor Primarch Alfarius, but was mortally wounded by his traitor brother Fulgrim and placed into stasis. Moving on then, we actually have some more background information about Roboute Guilliman himself. So, Primarch of the Ultramarines, Roboute Guilliman is a living, breathing legend and a link to humanity's lost glories. Risen in an age of darkness, he strives to reunite humanity and ensure the survival of an Imperium besieged. So, Roboute Guilliman was one of the 20 Sons of the Emperor, the Primarch project that saw the introduction of demigods, pretty much, to lead the, at the time, loyal legions during the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. Before the project was completed, the Primarchs in infancy were scattered by the forces of chaos, and Guilliman was found on the planet of Macragge in the Ultramar system, where his adopted parents raised him, and he eventually took control of the planet, making the entire region of Ultramar a great, vast empire. Of course, when the Emperor eventually found him, he instantly knew who the Emperor was and knelt and swore his forces to protect the Emperor forever, and took control of the 13th Legion, the Ultramarines. During the days of the Horus Heresy, though, he did do a little bit of heresy himself. He did plan on relocating the entire Imperium to the Ultramar sector. He had a little bit of a falling out with some of his brothers, notably the Lion, but he did eventually take part in the... He would have took part in the Battle of Terra. Sadly, though, he was delayed by traitor forces sent by Horus. He does take it a little bit hard and blames himself for not being there to help protect the Emperor when the Emperor fought against the traitor. But after that, though, he did decide to break down the Space Marine legions into the chapters and penned the Codex Astartes, just so that there weren't any such temptations by commanders to create another heresy. Although this almost did create a heresy, as Rogal Dawn was staunchly against the Codex, but many of the other brothers did follow and accept it, seeing his point pretty clearly. Of course, after the Horus Heresy, there was the Scouring, where the loyal forces pursued the traitors, and in such a pursuit, he met up with the demon Primarch Fulgrim, who mortally wounded him. He was covered and put into stasis on Macragge for all to see. So, got a nice quote from Roboute there, and a little more about him in the Era Indomitus. So he's the Lord Commander, which is the status he had after the Battle of Terra. So he's returned to lead the Imperium in place of his father. He has the backing of Belisarius Cawl and also the Eldari Priestess Yvraine. Not to mention Living Saint Celestine and Inquisitor Greyfax there as well. So of course he is a High Lord of Terror, as being Lord Commander. And he took it upon himself to sort of revive his father's crusade by creating the Indomitus Crusades, which helped bring much needed reinforcements to various parts of the galaxy. So moving on then, we have part 2 of the Obelisk and Lyrak campaign. So this is the Death Guard's attempt to take the worlds in the Metallica system and the Obelisk subsector entirely. With the Metallican Gate now under threat and believing that Metallica itself may be imperiled, Fabricator General Heptus Clang of the Adeptus Mechanicus opted to take drastic action, ordering Metallican forces to abandon their allies and return to defend the Forge World. So this details the retreat of the Metallican forces from the overall conflict to protect their home planet, which is important. It does send out arms and munitions to various Imperium forces. But it did weaken the Imperium forces. But it was thanks to a fleet hailing from the Forge of Deimos, emerging from the warp and bringing with them the Grey Knights to help push back against the forces of chaos and even the Drukhari that are plaguing the system. So I've got a little bit about Heptus Clang there, and the Malignancy Unleashed, which is the first occurrence of the malignant miasmic malignifiers even, which are putrid reactors that build plagues and spread it out across the planets. They take root much like a tree would, and it basically helps the forces of Nurgle take control of planets a lot easier. Finally then, for our lore, we have the Price of Vengeance. So this details the continuing and the ending of the Rogue Trader Journal. So this starts with the Void Mistress and Sonora von Hart and her crew taking a well-earned break. Of course, things don't go to plan, as always. They are approached by an Inquisitor who has located, or thinks they've located, the traitorous Rogue Trader, who caused a little bit of trouble for them in the previous few issues. And so they go out in search of this guy and get some much needed revenge. We see here a map leading them to the ultimate battle at the Helixia system. Through the journeys, they cross paths with Eldari craft worlds, various ancient Eldari worlds, including one with a ruined Titan, and of course various other Imperium and Eldari cities and planets. So the battle at Helixia comes to blows in a massive fleet battle. So the battle begins with the initial blows trading from ship to ship. Boarding actions take place of Imperium and Eldari vessels attacking the larger craft, and then finally, of course, victory. So down here we actually have a list of all the ships that take part in the battle. So we've got the Void Mistress, part of the Rogue Trader fleet, and is a strike cruiser. We've got the Phoenix, another Rogue Trader ship. This time it's only a little frigate. The Pride of Lethis, another Rogue Trader frigate. The Evac Megarion Skippy and Adeptus Mechanicus cruiser. And Saccharus Vexor 66, another Mechanicus cruiser. And finally, the Scouring One, an Inquisitorial Falchion escort frigate. On the opposing side, we've got Gaia's Grace, an Eldari Corsair dragon ship. Solar Flare, an Eldari Aurora-class fighter craft. Vor's Endurance, an Eldari Wraith ship. You got Face Fortune, part of the traitor Sloane's forces, which is a heavy cruiser. The Regulator, a light cruiser. And Anathema, a frigate. So these are all parts of the traitor, rogue trader Sloane. And the battle does luckily end with Sloane apprehended, taking much needed time to repair, and Von Hart has been, gone back to doing what rogue traders do. So it is deemed that she is, she's fine. She serves the Imperium greatly. So actually, having just read this, it looks like she may be presumed dead. So we don't know. She's sort of missing in action, as it turns out. But yeah, case sealed. She is deemed worthy of the Emperor's protection in the afterlife, or even in the living life if she's still alive. Moving on then, we have our build guide for Roboute Guilliman, and it does recommend you build it into a few sub-assemblies here. So you want to build the heads separate, the main torso separate, leaving the backpack eagle off, and leaving the base separate as well. So building them up, it does go pretty much like you think. Luckily for change, we actually start at part 1 and move through in relative number order. So we are building up the main torso here, then we move on to the legs and the arms. So second arm, the backpack, then we're putting the components all together onto the one main assembly. We've got a few pipes here that need to go into place. They are a little tricky to get to stick, as it's only shallow dips where they attach on the side here on the armour. So you may want to hold it in place with a pair of tweezers while the glue sets. I was lucky, I managed to get them to sit pretty much in place. I think the pipe here is a little low though. And stage 1 is complete with attaching the arms. You could easily leave this arm off so you can reach all the detail underneath. I kind of wish I did. If I ever do get another Guilliman, maybe I'll do it a little bit different. But I'm definitely going to be following the same paint techniques that I used for my model. Alright, so subassembly 2 is a bit that I will tell you to do a little differently. So yes, glue these in, but once the glue is dry, I do suggest you snap them off. Why do I suggest this? Because they are a very fragile, barely 2mm pole. What I did was I snapped them off and clipped them down using my clippers and a knife. And then I replaced the stands with a bit of paper clip. And this has made them 100% much more stronger and are less likely to snap off during a painting process. So yeah, all you have to do is just drill a couple of holes in the bases for them to go into. Drill a hole in the bottom. Like I said, I cut the stand right off as close to the Aquila as I can, so I've got a nice flat area to drill straight up into it. And yeah, like I said, it works a lot better than using the components as they are. They are a little on the fragile side. So yeah, there we have it. And then we just build up the rest of the base. So the Aquila head, the Fallen Chaos Legionary, and then gluing it all down to the 60mm round base. Next up then, our third sub-assembly, which is his backpack ornamentation. So it's literally just gluing the iron halo onto the head of the Aquila. Sub-assembly 4 is building the heads. You have the option of 2 heads, either a bare head or a helmeted head. I was going to go initially for the helmeted head, but I used it as a tester for my paint method. and kind of messed up a few bits. So I did end up going for the bear head, which I still think looks best anyway. So after you finish painting it, you can then glue it together properly. So you do have to glue, although it tells you to put glue tack over the arch here and on the inside of the Aquila, it doesn't actually glue onto this bit, it glues onto two little notches just on the inside of the vents there. The head you can easily get away with without gluing. I did. I got away as much of the blue tack I used to cover up the hole as I could, and then I just pushed the head in and it's solid. And then on the base I did put blue tack where his foot attaches to the Aquila there, and over here. Once it's removed, glue them down as usual. So that is it for issue 79. We do of course have our mission here, which we will cover in our battle report. So now let's take a look at issue 80 before we move into my gallery where I go over Guilliman himself. So as I said earlier, this issue is 70, maybe even 80% just the paint guide. Then we have his data sheet and of course our final mission for the veteran pack. So our paint guide kicks off by detailing the sub-assemblies and using blue tack or adhesive putty. Then it wants us to paint it Macragge blue, washing it Nuln oil, relayering Macragge blue on the flatter panels, picking out Abaddon black on the joints and the Mechanicus cog symbols. Then we're picking out our metals, so we've got lead belcher on quite a lot of details to pick out, and then we've got all that gold trim. Now, this is where I did things differently, which I'll explain in a minute when we get to the gallery. But if you are following this guide, do just take your time picking out all that detail. There's a lot of it. It may seem daunting, but break it down, do a leg at a time, then go take a break, come back, do the other leg, take a break, come back, do the torso, then do the arms, etc, etc. But yeah, it will take a while to do, but it does work this way. Next up, Corax White on the Ultramarine symbols. There's two, one on his shoulder and one on his knee. And then, of course, picking up the Cog Mechanicus detail as well. Rakoff Flesh on all our parchment, and Scream of Pink on the Purity Seal, as well as the sword grip. Then the Fiston Red for all the wires, and then we're moving on to our wash stage. So we're washing pretty much everything. Nuln oil that we've just painted. So mostly all the silver details, the Purity Seal wax, all the red details, and the Scream of Pink. Then we're using White Glove Flesh Shade to shade over all the gold trim. And our Grax Shade is finally used to shade over all the parchment details. Then we're moving on to highlighting. So the armour was highlighted with Calgar Blue, the ribbing with Mechanica Standard Grey, finally Administratum Grey. Stormhost Silver is used to highlight all the silver metallics, as well as all the gold. Yeah, just take your time, there's lots of details to pick out. Just go around working on all the edges. Next up then, White Scar to edge highlight the Mechanicum symbol and the Ultramarine News. One stage I forgot to do was relayer with Rakoff Flesh. I kind of wish I did, but I went straight onto the Pallid Witch Flesh edge highlight. But it looks good still. But I think the shoulder pad could look a little bit more clearer if I had re-highlighted Rakoff Flesh first. Something I'll make sure I do differently on the next time I paint Guilliman, if there is such a time. For his final colours then, it's Pink Horror on Purity Seals and Sword Grip, and Wild Rider Red for all our Mephiston red areas. I have done the little screen back here red instead of a gold panel. I think it looks better as a screen. Next up is painting the Emperor's Sword. Now, this is a brilliant paint guide. I actually used it, but I exchanged a few of the colours. Again, I'll explain in a minute. But yeah, really good paint guide. You can follow it and you will get a good result. Face paint guide, again, pretty good technique, method. There is one step I will tell you not to do, and that is that. Yeah, it doesn't work. It looks horrid. Nice bright green against a rather pale sort of fleshy colour. It doesn't work. I've done it a little bit darker. I actually used Warpstone, not Warpstone Glow. I used I can't remember what it is now. But I used one of the new green contrast paints and then highlighted with yellow just on the tips. Warp Lightning. There we go. I knew I'd remember it eventually. Warp Lightning. That's the contrast paint I used. And that looks a lot better, as you'll see in a bit. As for the hair, I did Baylor Brown first, then did Uriel Yellow, then did a wash, then did highlights with Ushabti Bone, did a second light wash with Rhinecone Flesh Shade, and then did final highlight with Screaming Skull. When it comes to the eyes and highlighting the face, I did pretty much follow the methods here, but after doing the Pallid Witch Flesh, I thinned down Rhinecone Flesh Shade at 2:1 with Lamy Medium and gave a thin glaze just over the flesh areas just to knock back those rather stark, bright highlights. And the eyes, I actually did follow the paint guide here, but where we paint Abaddon Black here in the actual eyes themselves, I used Black Legion contrast paint just on the tip of a very thin brush, and then I did Pallid Witch Flesh and then a dot of Abaddon Black. Then finally, Stormhost Silver Mechanica Standard Grade to pick out the details on his collar, and you're done. Then we're moving on. If you have built the helmeted head option, it's much the same as building the body. Again, they used the Tesseract Glow here for the laurels, and it looks a little better, but it's just still too bright a green. Laurels aren't really a bright green plant. I should know I have a laurel bush outside my house, and yeah, they're more of a darker green with bright green on the edging. I mean, I know they do wash Nuln Oil, but I really think they could probably do 2 coats of Nuln Oil just if you're going to do it this way. And yeah, the only other additional step is to pick out the eyes with Wild Rider Red there. But otherwise, it's much the same as painting the armour. Finally then, we're painting the base. So this is a pretty good tip. If you are ever doing a model with a detailed base, do this first. Apply your texture paint. Once that is dry, then paint it with your base colour so it all blends in together. It's a brilliant tip, one I sometimes forget, but it is much better than having the paint texture paint looking a slight different shade of grey to the actual rest of the base. So yeah, do that, put your texture paint down first, let it dry, paint Mechanica Standard Grey. I did actually prime mine with I think I did black and then grey over it just to help add some extra shading. Then you go back with Nuln Oil, dry brush of Dawnstone, and that was pretty much it. I did eventually do some minor glazing with Angrax Earthshade just to show sort of like a dust build up on certain areas. Next up, we're picking out our skulls with Rakar Flesh and all our metal details with Lead Belcher and bolt gun casings with Retributor armor. Shading the silver with Nuln Oil, the gold with Reichland Flesh Shade, and the skulls with Agrax. Before picking out Stormhost Silver on all the metals and Pallid Witch Flesh on all the skulls. Finally, we're painting our Fallen Chaos Legionary. And yeah, if you've got Premium Kit 1, it's pretty much the same method we've done there. So painting the armor Abaddon Black, trim Retributor armor, bone, Rakar Flesh, metal areas, Lead Belcher, red details Mephiston Red before shading over with Reichland Flesh Shade, Agrax Earth Shade, and Nuln Oil. I followed it except for this bit. I didn't do Calgar Blue. I did my Elatok Blue, then Hoeth Blue Extreme Highlight. Sadly though, they did go on a little chunky in places. I couldn't get the mix ratio with water and paint right, and it either flowed too quickly or just clogged up. So I eventually went back in with some Black Legion, which is what I base coated the model with anyway, because I'd done grey originally. So I then did all the trim first, and then I picked out any of the panels again with Black Legion. Then any areas I highlighted, I put some Black Legion on and thinned the lines down a bit just so they didn't look too thick and chunky. And yeah, there we are. Instead of Wild Rider Red, I did do Evil Sun Scarlet, and I put in a pupil as well with some Abaddon Black. And finally then, we have our painting of the braziers. So it's much the same as painting the sword. And yeah, it's a pretty good way of doing our flame with the colours in the magazine. But again, I used the same colours as I used on the sword myself. Finally, assembling him, putting the components together, making sure you don't use too much glue and in the right positions. And there we have our finished gallery. And I just realised most of that was off screen. Oh well. But yeah. Right then. We've got our rules, but we'll go through that when we come to our final mission. Although it isn't our final mission. Our final mission will be the campaign battle, which starts in issue 81. We got the Paragon Warsuits parts 1, 2, and then part 3 in issue 83. But we get some pretty cool models. We get the campaign, which is a really nice fought out campaign. It looks like it's going to run pretty well. As I've mentioned in other Imperium videos, I am going to wait till we've got all 10 additional issues. So once we get to issue 90, I've got so far up to issues 86, which is the first part of the Redemptor Dreadnought. So I just need 87, 88, 89, and 90, which should be here next month. Yeah, I'm going to work through each of the issues, just covering the contents of the magazine quickly for you all. And I'm going to work on building and painting the models before getting it all ready and running through the campaign one mission at a time. Right then, let's bring in Guilliman and get him on the turntable for a quick gallery before we finish up. And here we have the finished Roboute Guilliman, looking all regal, Primarchy, and ready to rally the Imperium forces and take the fight to the Necrons for one final mega battle. And then, like I said, we've got the campaign up next, so it is going to be pretty much a reclamation of the story, taking back the worlds of Necrons of contested dominions of, and in some cases it's the Necrons taking back off the Imperium. But as you can see, I have painted up this guy using a slightly different method, excuse me, to the actual magazine. So how did I paint Guilliman? I started off with a Wraithbone spray on the torso, the backpack detail, and the head. Chaos Black spray on the base. Then I painted the entire model with gold. That's right, I worked from the gold outwards. This had the added bonus that the gold not only stayed a consistent state of completion, but it also had the fact that I got what could be a rather messy stage out the way first. So, as I said, I painted it with Retributor armor in 2 coats over the Wraithbone base. I then shaded the entire model with Reikland Flash Shade before picking out all the silver details with Leadbelcher, which I shaded with Lone Oil. Then I picked out any of the gold details, especially on the gun ammo feed there, and got them up to the same state before giving the entire model a dry brush of Stormhost Silver. Then I began a painstaking method of blocking in all the blue. So I started quite easily with Ultramarines blue contrast paint. As this was thin, I used a really small brush and I was able to just push it into the recesses, working it around all the gold trim, and because it's a fairly wet paint, it was easy to wipe away if I overspilled anywhere. I also kept a spare brush on hand with some clean water in case I got it on a little too thick in places, so I could just soak it up and move it away. After that then, I had another painstaking job putting in the brighter blue. So I used Calidor Sky. So yeah, this method may sound a little familiar if you've watched Mediocre Hobbies. It was pretty much a mishmash of his method and a little bit of my own and the magazine. But I pretty much picked out all the blue flat panels with Calidor Sky, leaving the Ultramarine blue in the very deepest recesses. After that, I decided to give it a little bit of an edge highlight, but I only edge highlighted the areas where the light is more prominent. So the outside of his legs, leaving the inside a slightly darker shade, and of course the ends of his fingers, his toes, the upper parts of the back banner detail, which actually, yes I did do. And I picked those out with the lightest blue I had that also worked well with Calidor Sky, which was Lofen Blue. I believe there's another one in between, which I think is called Seaguard Blue. I'm not too sure. But I didn't have that, so I went with what was closest. And I think it looks pretty good. It does help give him a much more regal and ornate looking armor. It helps him stand out against the rest of the Ultramarines, which I've done with just my Crag Blue. But yeah, it really helps him stand out and look like a unique model. So the next part I'm going to talk about quickly then is the head, as I've already covered most of the head details. As I said, I primed it with Wraithbone. I then washed it with I picked out the hair first with Balor Brown before giving the whole head a wash with Reikland Flesh Shade. Then I gave a second coat of Reikland Flesh Shade just over the face on the areas where the skin is deepest, so around his cheeks, over his forehead, and in between near the eyes and around his mouth. After that, I layered out the hair with Uriel Yellow before a final highlight of Ushabti Bone, another shade over with Reikland Flesh Shade, Finned, and then this time I used Screaming Skull to pick out final highlights on the most upper parts of his hair. Returning to the face, I followed pretty much the magazine after that initial step. So I highlighted all the prominent ridges of his face using Pallid Witch Flesh. Before I moved on to the eyes, I thinned down Reichland Flesh Shade 2:1 with Lime Medium and gave it a thin glazing over the whole of the face, which dulled down those highlights, but still, as you can see, kept it nice and defined. Then I used Pallid Witch Flesh. Well, first off, I used Black Legion to dot in the eyes, before Pallid Witch Flesh and a final dot of Abaddon Black for the pupil. For his laurels, as I said, I painted over Warp Lightning, and that was just straight up over the previously painted colours. So I think it went straight over the Wraithbone. Painted that with Warp Lightning, as I said, and then edge highlighted the tips of the laurels with Uriel Yellow. If I can zoom in a little better for you there, you can just about see there. And yeah, I think that looks a little more realistic compared to the magazine's method. Finally then, the only bit I want to talk about then is the Emperor's Sword and the braziers. So, I did follow the magazine method, but I did swap the colours around a little bit. So, while I do have all the colours in the magazine, I decided to do things a little different. As I'd already used contrast quite a lot on this guy, I wanted to keep going with that method. So I coated the entire sword with Corax White, got 2 layers over the Wraithbone, giving it a nice solid cover. Instead of Uriel Yellow, I then used Imperial Fist contrast paint. Just a single layer over the white got a brilliant coverage and coated the sword lovely and yellow. But that is a little too yellow. So instead of Troll Slayer Orange, I used the slightly more orange yellow of Iandan Yellow contrast. Thinned it a little bit with some water and then washed it all over the entire sword, focusing mainly around the flames and the base of the sword. I then took Blood Angel's red contrast paint instead of Mephiston red, which focused more around the tips of the actual flame. I did thin this down 2:1 with contrast medium, just so it wasn't as strong. Finally then, for the Abaddon Black details at the tip, I just used a little bit of Black Legion straight from the pot. And then the last 2 stages, I just followed the methods of the magazine. So I edge highlighted the raised areas and the entire sword with Uriel Yellow, before picking out the most prominent areas and the very sharp edges with White Scar. So there you have it. That's pretty much Guilliman and how I painted him. The only thing I haven't done is given him a varnish. I did have to redo some of the gold trim. So his shoulder pad, I ended up relayering up using Liberator Gold, which is a fairly bright gold anyway, so it sort of works with the rest of the gold. Then I washed it over with a thinned Reichland Flesh Shade just to brighten, make it match in a little better. The only thing I forgot to do was give a final highlight with some Stormhost Silver, but I don't think it needs it. It helps the shoulder pad stand out, and really you can't tell that there's, especially on camera, you can't tell that there's 2 different methods of gold going on there. I also used the Liberator Gold method in a few areas where I overspilled with blue, namely on the shoulder pad rims and some of the upper leg area armor trim, which luckily we can't see very well anyway due to the way the model is posed. But there we have it. Like I said, all I'm going to do is give this guy a varnish to protect him. I may even put some snow down just to help tie him in with the rest of my Ultramarine force and the Imperium collection as a whole. But that's it for this video. So thank you all for watching. Like I said, I've hopefully edited in the footage of the frame for you to quickly look at the beginning of the video. And yeah, I'm going to be now focusing on editing this video to try and cut it down a little bit. I think I talked over a bit too much, really, on certain methods, but we'll see how it goes. And yeah, so of course, don't forget to like this video, share it on your social medias, comment down below. How have you got on doing your Roboute Guilliman, and have you found another artist's method that's worked well for you? Let me know in the comments down below. And all what's left for me to do is to say thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time for more mad content. Thank you and goodbye.